Okay, good morning everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Sam Jacobs from 6 Degrees Investor Relations, and I'll be hosting the presentation from Melbana Energy Executive Chairman Andrew Purcell, who will also be joined today by the company's Exploration Manager, Dr. Duncan Lockhart. Today's presentation will provide an update on the company's recent progress and forward operations for the Alameda 2 appraisal well being drilled in its Block 9 PSC area, onshore Cuba. After the presentation, we'll commence a Q&A, which will comprise written submissions and also live questions where attendees will have the opportunity to ask questions directly. Those who registered for Melbana's February webinar may be familiar with the format, but if you'd like to join the live Q&A, just refer to your GoToWebinar control panel and click on the hand icon, which will then place you in the selection queue. Keep in mind that once selected by the moderator, you will receive a prompt to unmute your microphone. So just select unmute and then you can proceed with your question. As previously highlighted, it is a priority of the Melbana management team to facilitate direct engagement with shareholders, and that's what the live Q&A is for. Obviously, we want to conduct it in a cordial and timely manner, so please keep that in mind once you've been selected. And just in the interest of timeliness, once you've asked your question, you'll be placed back on mute and we'll throw it over to Andrew and Duncan. As usual, a copy of the webinar will be available on Melbana's website and social media platforms later today. And you can download a copy of the company's most recent announcement by navigating to the handouts pane in the control panel. But for now, I'll throw it over to Andrew to kick things off. Andrew, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Good to be back. Much appreciated for facilitating. I've put together a short presentation today just to provide context. What I think is the purpose of this webinar is to give people a chance to ask questions in a live environment. So if we move forward a couple of pages, please, Sam. The agenda for this short presentation is listed there. And I'll start just with an overview of the results of Alameda 1 that we've had historically. Just to put it in context, we drilled the exploration well, Alameda 1, finished it last year, had it independently assessed, given all the interesting results we had of independently separated oil-bearing formations that we called it Amistad, Alameda, and Marti. The oil flows into the well bore were very exciting, but it was an exploration well, and it was all that could be done by that well that we asked a lot of to get through all those formations and give us more information for our geoscience team. But it was enough for the independent assessors to give us a very substantial oil in place number of 5 million barrels with a prospective resource of 267 million barrels. We've taken the time since completing that well to go and design an appraisal program to test each of these independent intervals. And that was best devised by our engineering team to be done with 2 wells. The first well is Alameda 2, which we started last month about this time, about a month ago. And it's testing this upper sheet, this Amistad formation, which has the about 2 billion barrels of oil in place. If we go forward a page, please, Dan. So what these appraisal programs are designed to do is to give us all the information that we can assess the technical and commercial properties of these reservoirs in order to be able to design a field development plan to get stuff into production. So we're doing a whole new set of wireline logging again. We're doing, in addition, a coring program. We're flowing the oil in a controlled manner this time, getting clean samples that we can take quality assessments. And so it's a very methodical and scientific well that gives everything that we need to know that we couldn't get last time. We're going to do these wells back to back. And we're going to, once we complete the Alameda 2 well, we'll have some work to be done on assessing the results there. We've got a wellhead to remove on the pad from the old Alameda 1 probably, and then we'll be into the Alameda 3 well. And it will have the same objectives, the same testing program, the same suite of information to be gathered. Next page, please, Sam. Where we are as of now is that we have already got through the first unit, Unit 1A. So in this upper interval, which will make it a little bit clearer in a moment, I'll show you the diagram that you've no doubt all seen on the next page. But this Unit 1A, the first and shallowest unit that we went through, we've tested that, we've announced that, you know, we've been very encouraged by the results of that shallowest unit, and particularly from such a shallow depth, having oil flow unassisted to surface has greatly exceeded our expectations and given us a whole new set of parameters to think about in the field development plan. This is not atypical for Cuba. This is upper sheet, and this is where they produce from. But knowing that we now look like we have something to play with there too, it just adds to the, you know, the basket of goodies we have to play with. The logging results that we've attained to date, both in that upper unit and in subsequent units, they've been of an excellent quality. And keen observers of the company will remember that, you know, last time around, you know, we had excellent oil shows in some of these intervals, but we were unable to log them because of various technical issues, rugosity, or, you know, washout in the well bores, etc. This designed well for an appraisal program hasn't had these issues, so we've got a lot more logging over a lot more interesting areas. So we're looking forward to having more to say on that very soon as to what that may mean for our assessment of the commercial potential of these areas, but certainly for their resource potential. We're now down and have set casing at what we think is the seal for the Unit 3 interval. And if I go to the next page, we'll just give you a graphical perspective just to remind you. So we're talking about the Amistad unit, which is the very top one there in a sort of pale blue with a green dashed line going through it. And it's, that's the units 1A and 1B. 1A I've talked about, we've announced, we've been through, we've flowed. 1B, we've drilled straight through, because the plan is to get right down to the bottom, down to the most interesting unit, Unit 3, which we're just on the cusp of entering now, and test that. Once we've done that, we're going to come back up and test Unit 2, and then back up and test Unit 1B. And that's the entire objective of this Alameda 2 well. You can see the dotted black line, which is the proposed Alameda 3 trajectory, which basically just twins the well we drilled last year, but with a different design specifically for the conditions we encountered last year to allow us to do the testing that we want. Next page, please, Sam. Put a simple timeline here, so what I've just said can be perhaps better understood graphically. You know, where we are today, 19-20 July, it's 21 July here, 20 July in Cuba. We're into the 6-inch section today. We're going to be doing some coring, then drilling ahead to total depth in the TD and the Unit 3, do some logging, and then we're into testing it. Probably this time next week, Friday of next week, Saturday here, maybe Friday Cuba. We'll be testing that deepest Unit 3, so we may have some results and something to say early the week after. Following that, it's 1 or 2 days up to the shallower Unit 2, so soon thereafter, and then same again after that, back up to Unit 1B, and all of those tests will then be completed, and we'll have a whole suite of new data. I'm hoping as good as what we've got today to really inform the geoscientists to give us advice on what we have here in this upper sheet section. Next page, please, Sam. I've put in a diagram that also graphically shows the drilling and casing depths of what we've done thus far, where we've taken cores, where we plan to take cores, where we've done the drill stem tests, where the pressure points are, for those more interested in that sort of graphical representation used in the drilling industry. So that's a very good summary, very quick download. I concluded by saying that we're very pleased with progress today. We're well ahead of schedule. Things are going well. This whole upper interval, this whole Amistad interval is icing on the cake for us. It's not the main game. We're in block 9. Our ideas are to look for deeper, lighter crude using the intellectual ability of our geoscience team and their understanding of this formation in Cuba, and that's the main game. But geez, it's nice to have this upper sheet looking as good as it is too, because it just underwrites everything else, you know, we want to do in Cuba. So if I stop there, I think there's probably a lot more information that people want to get out of this presentation, out of Duncan and myself. We're here and happy to answer your questions. So over to you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So we might just kick off the questions with written submissions, and then I can see some attendees have registered to ask a live question. So we'll alternate over there. But just for question 1 that came through in writing, Andrew, and factoring in the near-term timeline that you just highlighted through to early August, one of the questions was, what is the expected timeline for completion of the Alameda 2 campaign, which includes drilling, flow test, logging, etc.? And is Melbana currently seeking an option to acquire a second drill rig?
Well, I think on the timeline, just go back to that page I just talked about. We're ripping through this, and I think, you know, we've done, you know, mid to late July at latest. For rigs, we've got a number of irons in the fire. There are other rigs, unutilized rigs in country we're talking to the operators of, and we have been working with our existing contractor to also get their service rig certified to give us another option there for workovers as well. So we're looking to have a number of options for drilling going forward, both in the shallow, the workover, and the deeper targets for next year. In the expectation, planning for the success case that, you know, we've got a commercial oil field here and we want to get after it as quickly as possible next year.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Andrew. So what I'll do now is go over to our first live Q&A question. User Mark Ruffles, or Ruffles, sorry if I've pronounced that incorrectly. So Mark, I've just sent you a prompt to unmute, and when you Mark, you're live now, so you can ask your question. Thanks, Mark.
Oh, hi. Thanks, Andrew. I'm just wondering, when you get to a production stage, how do you plan to export the oil out of there?
Thanks, Mark. A couple of different options will be available to us depending on the type of oil that we have. This upper sheet is a typical Cuban quality crude, and what we have put in place is trucking operations to take it the 30 or so kilometres from where we are to a battery where all Cuban production gets stored, and that trucking route will serve us perfectly fine immediately and in the first year while we develop bigger and more permanent infrastructure. But if it's lighter crude, then the same route applies, again initially by trucking, but to the export terminal in Matanzas. That's also about 30 kilometres away. So the great opportunity for us with a project like this is it's an island and we're close to the coast, and they've got existing deep water ports and oil terminals and battery storage. We don't have to develop any of that. We just have to get it to the doorstep and then let people who want to buy it.
Thanks, Andrew. For next live Q&A question, Gary Jelgren. Gary, I've just sent you the unmute prompt. Yeah, hi Gary, you're live now, thank you.
I actually don't have a question, so that's fine, thanks.
All good? Okay, thanks Gary. No worries. So Andrew, just moving on, we've got a number of questions that were submitted in writing that we can work through for you to provide more context. One of the other questions was, can you elaborate on recent news regarding Melbana applying for 3 more well pads, and are these exploration wells, appraisal wells or production wells?
Well, I think as I've said probably before in this forum or otherwise, my job for this year is largely done with what's happening in Cuba. The engineering and geoscience team have got the job of drilling the appraisal wells that were funded for, that are planned, that are permitted, get on with it, and come back with the results that we're wishing for. My job, and that of some of my colleagues, is we're always looking 12 months ahead, and we're planning for the success case. And these are large formations. And if we've got commercial oil that we've proven up in this appraisal program, then next year we're going to want to be putting in more production wells. And given these are 10, 20 kilometres across these structures, having a few other pads, you know, that allow us to step out 500 metres or a kilometre to points of interest on the seismic to allow us to put more wells in and get more production up quickly. Well, it takes 6 to 9 months for environmental permitting and land access agreements and all of those things. So we're getting that ball, we've got that ball rolling, so they're well ahead and built and the civil work's done and all ready to go for when we need to put the rings on them.
Thanks, Andrew. Just moving on to the next written question. Does Melbana expect an upgrade to resource estimates based on the recent observations from the A2 drill? And specifically, can the company provide some insight into resource estimates for each zone of the current drill?
Oh, that sounds like a good one to throw in my exploration.
Yeah, excuse me, thanks very much for that. What we can say is that the logging results that we've seen from the whole section that we've just drilled have been excellent due to the excellent quality of the whole condition. And as a result of that, we've been able to get a lot more logs than what we did in previous wellbore, including logs such as a formation imaging tool, and also we've been able to measure formation pressures. So what that means is that we're currently doing a detailed log analysis over this section. We're able to incorporate now all the dense, highly fractured nature of the limestone reservoir that we've been in, which is coincident with all the oil that we've seen coming over the shakers. The formation pressures that we've measured have confirmed the presence of an oil column gradient throughout the section, and also confirmed that we have got some permeable rock there as well. So everything is coming together nicely in that respect, but we still have some work to do on the interpretation. Now, we've already got the independent resource estimates which have been provided by McDaniels in place, and these will be reviewed, but only when we've got all the information that we have, that we're going to get from this appraisal program. It's very important also to remember that, like Andrew just mentioned, that the Alameda 2 well is only checking the upper Amistad sheet, and we still have Alameda 3, which will be drilling into the deeper targets and assessing that. So once we've got all that information together, there will be an update on the independent resource estimates.
Fantastic, thanks, Duncan. One more written question before we go back to live Q&A. Just moving from operations to the capital side. One question was, is the company considering another capital raising at this juncture? And if not, can you please elaborate on how you'll fund activities going forward?
No, not contemplating any capital raise at the present time. Maybe people have an opportunity yet to look at the quarterly we just put out today, but we've got plenty of cash. It makes no sense to be looking to raise money at this point before we know what the results of these 2 appraisal wells are. And even then, you know, there are other ways to fund a field development once you've got a proven hydrocarbon system with reserves. You know, including from, you know, reserve bank lending, back lending, to prepayment for offtake agreements with the oil purchasers or traders, to, you know, bringing in other, you know, contractors who may want to, you know, have a long-term relationship and who can bring financing with them to do the work they need to do. So lots of options for us to fund a field development before we even begin to have to think in the year ahead about whether we need any more equity.
Thanks, Andrew. Just I'll keep working through the written submissions. We had a couple of users with their hand up. Yep, we've got a couple more now. So I'll revert back to live Q&A, sending the unmute prompt to user Ben E. Ben, you should get your prompt. Hi, Ben. You're live now. Thanks.
Yeah, hi, gents. Thanks for taking the time. Just two quick questions, probably a two-parter. This is probably more.
Sorry, Ben. Sorry, it's Sam here. Just you're really quiet at the moment. Just making sure that the Andrew and Duncan can hear your question. If you can get closer to a microphone or something.
Yeah, is that any better?
Yeah, that's a bit better. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, this is probably more for Duncan. Around the 3D space, obviously, reserves life will be sort of struggling to pack in or really as the full potential of the field until we can get some 3D over the structures. Has that become a higher priority now, or is that still sort of looking at late 2024, or what's the sense of that?
Yeah, look, thanks for the question. 3D seismic is definitively a priority for us because this is such a complex structural field, and we can only do so much of the existing 2D seismic. We are in the early planning stages for the 3D, but there's still a long way to go before we'll be able to acquire it. We'll also have to look at where we can source equipment to bring into Cuba as well to undertake the 3D. But yes, it's on the plans, it's on the radar, and we're walking down that road now.
And I told Duncan he can have 3D once we're funding it from, say, the ball production.
Yeah, so the battle continues.
Great. Thanks, guys. Just throwing it over for the next live Q&A to user James Darmody. James just sent you your unmute prompt. Just waiting for James. Nope, couldn't find James on this case. Another user, Tony Camilleri, has their hand up. So user Tony, are you live now? Hi, Tony Camilleri. Looks like we're just struggling on the technicals with Tony as well. I'll try and get both of those questions organised. In the meantime, I'll just go to another written submission for Andrew and Duncan. Andrew, slightly broader question, but this shareholder asked, in years gone by, oil was recovered from the Marty 1, 2 and the Marty 5, the latter having API oil of plus 24 degrees. Are the reasons known as to why these wells, even after revisit, were not further developed and instead plugged?
A couple of reasons when we looked into that as well. We were using them as a benchmark for offsets for developing our drilling programs initially. One was that they were wildcat wells drilled on gravity and information only. They didn't have the seismic benefits, and really they didn't understand what they were intercepting, and the wells, the way they were drilled, were very scientific and not very modern best practice. They drilled the wells and then they shut them in, and then the testing team came back 2 years later to test them, and formation damages. But B, they had the discovery of the Varadero oil field next door about the same time. It's a massive 11 billion barrel field, and that just sucked all the air out of the room in terms of, we've got so many options to be chasing and limited resources. Let's go after the lowest hanging fruit. That's what's happened.
Nice one. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, just go back to another live Q&A. We've got user Andrew Fawcett this time. So Andrew, I've just sent you your unmute prompt, and we'll see if Andrew goes live. Yep. Hi, Andrew.
Hi there. Just wondering, are the logs currently showing that fractures are throughout the Amistad so far, or just limited to the 63 metres?
Oh, no, all through the entire section. It is, I can't really say too much at the moment, obviously, but it is a very exciting log. It's densely fractured, and the fact that we've been able to see these fractures means that when we're doing the log analysis, we can actually incorporate a lot more into the net pay calculations as well, quite simply by the fact that we know that there's contribution coming from what are generally low porosity type rocks, but because they're so fractured, they're actually providing pay. So that's why it's taking us a bit longer than normal to pump out an announcement about what kind of log pay that we've got currently at the moment. But quietly optimistic that it will be a positive result here.
Sorry, Sam. Yeah, sorry, I was just on mute there myself. My apologies. I've just sent a live Q&A request out to James Darmody again, just trying to get a hold of James. But this one still not going live, unfortunately. So for all users, yeah, if you do want to ask a question, feel free to put your hand up on the live Q&A, and I will get to you, and we'll try and manage a few technical difficulties where we can. For now, Andrew, just back to these written questions that were submitted prior to the webinar. Another broad sort of, this one more of a macro theme, but I note that Cuba has been buying oil from Russia recently. Presumably the best option for Cuba would be to purchase oil produced from Alameda. What are the agreed commercial terms if Cuba chooses to purchase the oil, and how would Melbana ensure timely payment in that scenario?
Cuba only produces about half of what it needs. So it needs another, 40, 50, 60,000 barrels a day, and it's been a regular importer of crude from its neighbours, Venezuela, occasionally Russia, as far as, where we've been aware, so there's nothing new there. With regards to the second limit of the question, which was, it was about the agreed commercial terms, that's right. Under our contract, any oil that we produce, our share, that the Cubans want to purchase, they can, and they pay international benchmark prices. So in many respects, it's better for us if they do purchase it, because it's less work for us if it's just delivered up the road. There is, the payment terms, Cuba's histories of paying for the oil is good, and it's a very important commodity in their economy, principally because the oil they produce almost entirely goes into firing their electricity grid. So it's given a high priority in the budget every year. But and I put a but in there that, we're going after lighter crude, as I said earlier. That's the real game for us here. And if we're successful in getting lighter crude than what Cuba needs and can use, well, then it's an export play. And an export play that generates foreign exchange means good for Cuba, better income for us, less strain on the Cuban budget. All of those things come into play. So let's keep that as a watching point in the months ahead as we get through this appraisal program and see exactly what we've got. These deeper sections particularly.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Okay, just going back to the live Q&A now, sending the unmute prompt to attendee Frank Cunningham. So Frank, if you get your prompt, we'll just wait. G'day, Frank.
G'day, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Just a broader question. I understand the focus on the work around the current well pad and drilling. Is there any thought been given to going back to the well last year that was called a halt till, or the broader works on block 9, or does it really now come back to a focus around the current formations?
Well, there's a tension between myself and my exploration manager, yes, as to what comes next. But I'll let my exploration manager first talk to the Zapato.
Yeah. So just to look, the thesis behind that was that deep underneath these big ophiolites that there would be a productive carbonate zone. Now, when that well, as we were drilling it, you may recall, just prior to us going into the ophiolite section, we went through a fault zone and we had oil gushing out over the shakers. So that means that it's plumbed into something down below which is actually generating and producing oil because volcanics don't produce oil. Unfortunately, we by the time we got to our program TD, which was I believe 2,700 metres, we had not surfaced out of the volcanic sequence. Now we're currently actively, as I'm speaking, looking and reviewing the models, in particular for the gravity and magnetic data. We're having another fully independent review, this time done by people in Melbourne. And we're incorporating that with our seismic. So, you know, we're working this issue. But having said that, the primary focus at the moment is to go and get some barrels of oil out of the ground and get producing. But having said that, the 3D seismic survey that's in plan will not only just cover the big Alameda area, but it's also an exploration opportunity there as well. So we have we have at least 19 leads that we've already mapped in the area, and the 3D will help to define many of those. So there's plenty of excellent exploration opportunities left in this block. It's huge. But like Andrew said, it's production first at this point.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Frank. Yeah, just throwing it over to the next live Q&A now. To attendee David Coghill. David, we've just sent your unmute prompt.
Yeah, hi guys.
Hi, David, live.
Can you hear me? Yep,
loud and clear. Yep. Thanks.
Yep, just quick question about associated gas that you might encounter at the lower targets, and how you intend to handle that at the surface.
Well, we have the separation units, of course, which we've enhanced and expanded for this appraisal program from what we learned last year. The gas that we're producing from this drilling program is currently vented, and I don't get any information from my geoscientists or from the production engineering team that we've got such a significant amount of gas here that we have to devise a plan to do something with it. It really is just an associated situation. Do you add anything to that, Dan?
No, yeah, just to say that the oils that we see here are relatively dead oils in that respect. So there's not an overwhelming amount of associated gas, but we need to see what we're dealing with. We'll find out once we've actually got the information from the tests that we'll get in Alameda 3 from those deeper zones, and then we'll be able to quantify and qualify exactly what we're doing.
Thank you, Andrew and Duncan. So I'll just refer back to our written submissions now. Andrew, this one slightly more of a direct question, you might say, but some shareholders are unhappy with the quality of announcements, including unclear and at times vague wording that can be interpreted in many ways. Just how do you respond to that?
I appreciate the feedback. I think we're in a damned if you do and damned if you don't position, quite frankly. We like to keep our shareholders informed during exciting times in our company's operational stages like now. Many oil and gas explorers, while drilling wells, just choose to have a tight hole and say nothing, because it's really hard on the fly to be saying what's happening and what we're seeing before it's had the benefit of the time for all of the expert opinion in this organization to consider it, make an opinion, then change their opinion when they see what happens a week or two later. So it's a balancing act, and I accept sometimes I don't get it right. But thanks for the feedback, and please keep it coming, and I'll try to do better.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks, Andrew. Moving through the written submissions again, if any attendees are interested in a live Q&A, please feel free to tap that hand icon in your GoToWebinar panel. But another of the written questions, Andrew, turning back to the interest in potential M&A and touching on potential commercial discussions within Cuba that you've already done. But another question was, is there any interest or discussions from overseas companies in putting in place long-term oil purchase contracts with Melbana potentially in future? And also the second part of the question, have there been any interest in discussions from companies in a takeover offer at this stage?
Well, you might would know from a recent announcement that we've recently appointed a very experienced individual, Dr. Chris McEwen, as our Chief Commercial Officer, and his brief is to help me to run down the future of our company's funding and talk to traders who want to purchase oil, talk to contractors that may want to have a bit of skin in the game in order to fund drilling and seismic acquisitions, and all of those options are being run down at the moment, looking out 1, 2, 3 years ahead. So we're resourced properly to look at everything that's coming at us and free the engineering and operations team up to just focus on the job at hand and production, while we can think about how to maximize the value for shareholders from what we're finding here.
Thanks, Andrew. Another written question, just turning back more specifically to the project, but a slightly different angle here. For those curious in following Melbana's activities, can you live stream your drill pads on your website potentially?
Technically, it's possible, but we're not hooked up by a fibre optic cable to the internet where we are. We're relying on telemetry, radio signals, and there's a lot of demand on that bandwidth because a lot of the live logging, mud logging, drilling statistics are all accessed remotely by our operational experts in the operational office and internationally. Then there's the 50-odd plus people at the well site living and working there that, in their time off, probably like to watch a Netflix show or two. So the bandwidth is in high demand. So I don't think it's a likely thing, as good idea as it is.
No worries. Thanks, Andrew. Next question on the list. Yeah, turning back to the interesting macro thematic around Melbana, another shareholder was interested in, Cuban government aside, is Cuban society comfortable with foreign companies working and looking to extract their natural resources? For example, have you got positive or negative local press coverage and just general community engagement?
Yeah, we're a very highly valued member of the Cuban investment community. They love having us there. They'd love to have more foreign investment. The local community loves having us there. We're an Australian company. We do things to an Australian standard. So we look after people. We communicate openly. I find it one of the easiest jurisdictions I've ever had to operate in from a long career in both emerging and developed markets.
Yeah, nice one. Thanks for that, Andrew. And last one on the macro theme, but another shareholder asked, if the USA were to lift their Cuba embargo and normalise relations, would there be any legal claims from an American company or person over Melbana's interests if those geopolitical winds shifted?
That's a big question to answer in a quick way without seeming to be dismissive, but I would make these 2 points. The whole matter of nationalisation of projects and assets in Cuba that the US has an issue with related to everything built and developed, and the resources, the subsurface natural resources of the country were always the property of the government. So there's nothing there that could have been seized at any time, but it's something that we've done a bit of work on, and we're comfortable that's not a large risk for us at all.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Just another brief one, turning back to the capital management side. One shareholder asked, is the company considering a share consolidation?
No.
Simple as that. That was an easy one. Perhaps moving back to sort of project adjacent, one shareholder question was as follows. Was Zapata a failure aborted given the given depth that it was aborted, and time and cost? And realistically, do you think Zapata could be revisited in the future?
I think we've answered that one already. There's a great potential for one day, again, not in the immediate future.
Yeah, understood and noted. Thanks for that. So perhaps broadly, you've probably touched on this, but one shareholder just asked, avoiding typical catchphrases that you often see, like globally significant when it comes to resource definition. Can you talk broadly, factoring in the details that you've gone through in the presentation so far, but can you talk broadly about, has Melbana formed a more accurate view regarding the broader significance of Block 9 in the context of the global resource exploration sector?
Yeah, so many comparatives that you can draw. That is probably why I do use broad terms like globally significant. But you know, we've got hundreds of millions of barrels of resource. We've got billions of barrels of oil in place. Duncan, Australia, onshore Australia, for example, Cooper Basin. What would be something that would get everybody incredibly excited?
The biggest onshore oil field in the Cooper Basin, which is Bower, is around 20 million barrels, right? So Cooper Basin, everybody's looking for less than 1 million barrel type prospects. If you look at Dorado, I think it's a couple of 100 million barrels that was actually recently discovered, and that was offshore.
And you need hundreds of millions of barrels offshore.
Absolutely right. So the fact that this is onshore, the only places where you really get to see any fields of this dimension are in places like Iran or Iraq, generally. I think the last big onshore oil field, which is about 500 million barrels, was discovered by ADNOC in Abu Dhabi in 2022. So you can see that, you know, this discovery that we've got is massive. I spent a lot of time working in Kurdistan in the past as well, and I think you probably have to go back to 2007 to get the last discovery of any form of dimension of size that we're dealing with here onshore. I guess the other aspect of that too is that there's a lot of discoveries at the moment coming up in the deep water offshore of Namibia, but that's in 3,000 meters of water offshore. Yeah, and so to be onshore, it's just fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, guys. We've just got one more addition on the live Q&A. Attendee Robin Jeffries put their hand up. Robin, I've just sent you an unmute prompt. We'll see if we can get Robin live for a question. Just waiting on Robin. If you can hear us. No, I think we've lost Robin, but just working through another next live attendee on the list is attendee Glenn Winchester. So Glenn, we've just sent you your prompt. Just waiting to see if we can get Glenn live. And that one seems to be going quiet as well. So we'll just keep Glenn and Robin online, see if we can get them to unmute with the prompt. Andrew, just working through the live written questions in the webinar panel as well. One user, Alan Chamberlain, asked, how are you ensuring that there's no radio, that there is radio silence at the rig to avoid any leaks?
Well, we have induction sessions for all people that come onto the site as to the rules and governance standards we have as a listed company, and we reinforce and regularly reinforce the importance of a chain of command with communications. And there is a bottleneck for communications from the rig site to our drilling operations team and nearby operations office at Varadero, and they're all experienced professionals. So the drilling managers have decades with us. The team around us has been with us now for 2-3 years, many of them. You know, it's something that's important for us to be vigilant about, but you know, we do put in the education effort, and we do regularly remind people that it has to go out through the chain of command, any news.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Andrew. We'll have one more go at the live Q&A. Obviously, some users we're struggling with the tech difficulties, but I will try and unmute attendee Marcus Allen. So Marcus, if you can get your prompt, we'll try and get you live. Marcus, hi, you're live now.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Duncan and Andrew. Just in regards to A2, and hopefully we'll get quite a bit of oil flowing to surface, and this will be put on production. What's the maximum capacity of barrels of oil that we can produce and have going off that pad per day?
Well, we have a lot of on-site storage capacity. We have additional storage capacity just a few minutes up the road in an adjacent field where there's tanks available that are being unutilized. And then we have a battery 30 kilometers away, which is all Cuban production. It's massive tanks up there. And then it's the logistics question of just shuttling back and forth with the oil tankers, unloading and running it up the field. So what we put in place for this appraisal program is more than sufficient. What we need to be ready for, based on what we find here, is an expansion of that capacity in terms of trucking initially. But the upper sheet, just for example, in Cuba can produce anywhere from 400 barrels a day to thousands of barrels a day. So we're ready for that level of production capacity in this upper sheet alone, and then we're working on the lower sheet capacity expansions for logistics for next year.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Look, that rounds out a pretty comprehensive list of written and live questions. So I think Andrew and Duncan have done a good job at going through the presentation and then explaining the broader context around where the project's at. But Andrew, is there anything, or Duncan, is there anything that you'd like to add, given just off the basis of your presentations and also all the questions, whether there are some other key points that are worth addressing just to conclude the presentation?
Thank you, Sam. I think that's been pretty comprehensive. There's a lot of news flow coming over the weeks and months ahead, and I appreciate very much the attention from our very large shareholder base, and I encourage you to continue to ask questions, send us questions, call the office, email, and let us know where we're failing or providing you the information you feel you need. And we look forward to helping you to understand what we're doing better. It's a very exciting time in our company's history.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew and Duncan, and appreciate the time that you've made. It is a unique format and one that we think adds value, being able to talk directly to shareholders. So thanks to all the attendees and those who submitted questions, both for the live Q&A and in writing. Our apologies to any attendees if we didn't get to your question or if there were some technical difficulties there. But I think the number of questions, both written and live, are a testament to the level of interest and the ongoing engagement with the shareholder base. So yeah, thanks again to Andrew and Duncan. As mentioned earlier, a recording of the webinar will be available on Melbana's website and social media platforms later today. And for now, that'll just about wrap things up. So thanks again.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you.